Hello, hello, my fellow geeks. Welcome to episode number 50 of the Indian AvGeek. It's very cool to be able to say that. My name is Vishal Mehra. This, as you can imagine, a very special episode for me, a special podcast, and obviously, I wanted to invite somebody befitting that. I'm so glad that I was able to have my first choice on this one. Long-time listeners would know that we've had Star Alliance and Sky Team represented on the show in the past, and that made it easy for me. Today, on the Indian AvGeeks episode number 50, we have the CEO of CEOs, Nathaniel Pieper, although he might disagree with me there and would rather say he has 15 bosses. Nat took the helm of Oneworld Alliance just as it celebrated its 25th birthday last year. Not your typical suit and tie executive who just talks the talk. This guy has walked the entire runway. Literally from counting dollars at Northwest Airlines to orchestrating Alaska's entry into Oneworld. And now running the show for 15 of the world's most prestigious airlines as an alliance head. Talk about a management challenge that would make even the most seasoned air traffic controller break into a sweat. Welcome to the 50th episode of the Indian AvGeek, Nat.
How exciting, Vishal. Thanks so much for inviting me, and I'm thrilled to be with you and to celebrate such a monumental event. 50. That's exciting.
And all the more exciting with an airline lifer like yourself. I want to know what got you interested in aviation in the first place, Nat.
You're kind of say. I think an airline lifer is fair, but like most people, it'll be a varied story. So, Vishal, I grew up in Tampa, Florida, and for better or for worse, the two houses in which we lived were each within a mile of the Tampa airport, and so I played a lot of sports as a kid, and I have stories of from my parents of saying, you'd be out on the baseball field or someplace, and you're supposed to be ready, and then an airplane would fly over, and you'd look up always and see what kind of airplane was going over. My mother also has produced a number of very early years of artwork that I attempted to draw airplanes that looked more like tomatoes. So I think there's some history that was in that. So I always was interested in it, but not necessarily because of like the wonder of flight or that airplanes could actually take off. It was, I think, some of the competitiveness of why were all of these different named properties so competitive with doing it. But it was always kind of a thing I was interested in. And then it was only when I went to get my MBA at the Kellogg School of Northwestern, and I was fortunate enough to, Northwestern has a transportation engineering minor, and so you could take business school classes in the transportation school. And one of those was with a professor that had been with Frank Lorenzo and all the Eastern days. And it was basically a 4 hour class once a week where all this guy did was tell stories about being in the airline industry. And it was write two or three papers and basically listen to Aaron Gelman tell stories. And I was completely hooked. And then the third leg on the stool, I would say, is then I'm like, oh gosh, you could actually maybe make a career in doing that. I hadn't been sharp enough to think about it. And then Northwest Airlines, Continental, and United all recruited on campus at Kellogg. And, I did not go down the path of consulting or investment banking like most of my colleagues. They thought I was crazy, but like, follow something you think is interesting. I ended up at Northwest, and it's now been 28 years in this crazy industry.
So, right from your time at Northwest and then onwards to Delta, alliances have been a key part of your portfolio. Was it an intentional decision from your side or something you were always keen on? Just something that came along the way? What was it?
You know, Great question. I would say serendipity more than anything. So for me, roughly I've spent a third of my time doing alliances, a third of my time doing hardcore finance stuff within the airline industry, and then a third of my time doing all things airplanes, fleet, buying, selling, negotiating, and sometimes doing two of those things at a time. My job at Alaska, I actually got to do all three at the same time, which was fun, except for the pandemic, but we can get into that later. Um, but I think the best part about career and where I started at Northwest is, Vishal, I was blessed with some fantastic mentors. And so I started in the finance department in 1997, did finance and fleet. And then the last fleet project I did, Northwest was studying to be the launch customer for the 787. And Doug Steenland was the president of the airline. And Doug's eventually became CEO, is currently on the American board. And alliances, he's a lawyer by trade, and alliances was always his thing. And then equally, Northwest Airlines, fifth biggest in the US, but was with the crown jewels of alliances, its partnership with KLM. So at Northwest, it was in the water. It was partnerships were so important to everything we did. And so Doug needed a vice president of alliances. And so, listen, I knew enough on the ancillary about how important alliances were. Um, but Doug basically had the vision and kind of plucked me and said, I need somebody good in this. And I looked at him and I said, listen, I haven't spent an iota of my 8 years so far thinking about anything on the revenue line. I've kind of been the defense, but he said, no, I think this will be a really good job for you. You're a good negotiator. You communicate well. And so I did. And I feel so blessed, not only with the Northwest KLM joint venture, which again is the crown jewel of partnerships, but Northwest had 28 global partnerships. And so it was my first chance to do something international. It also was at the time that Northwest joined SkyTeam, and then I ended up being the vice chairman of SkyTeam in addition to my day-to-day responsibilities in alliance with Northwest. And so I kind of went from there and just great experiences. But I feel lucky and blessed. Without a mentor that kind of thought this would be a good thing to throw me in, I probably never would have done it. I would have stayed in finance all the way through.
Mentors are so important, especially when they come at the right time in your career. You mentioned fleet, Nat. I'm tempted to ask you your favorite aircraft of all time and your favorite aircraft as a passenger.
I'm going to answer that two ways. And so my favorite aircraft of all time, and this will belie my background, it's purely on economics. The best economical airplane of all time was the 757-300, which from a passenger perspective was probably the least enjoyed airplane. Exactly. The 757-200, a long tube already. Let's actually extend it a few more sections. But the math behind the airplane, and we ended up buying 20 of them at Northwest, one of the latter fleet deals I did. And I remember just being so excited about that, and then immediately trying to go buy every used one that we could find. So from a math perspective, that was my favorite airplane. From a passenger perspective, honestly, nothing gave me a bigger thrill than getting on a 747-400. Northwest had 16 of those airplanes flying to Asia from Minneapolis and Detroit and the West Coast. And that was one that I, Vishal, I rue the days that every different airplane was unique. Tail cones on DC-10s and 727s, the bubble on the 747-200 and 400. And I get that all of that just dates me as you've been around maybe for too long, but I miss those days a lot. And the 7.4 was always my favorite. The circular staircase, being upstairs, it was crazy, but super cool.
The 757 reminds me, have you been on the XLR yet? Airbus's intention is to get a 757-esque
Yeah.
economics and range. Probably would be better if I hazard a guess.
I haven't,
No.
but you're absolutely right in terms of the mission for the airplane. So at Northwest and at Delta as well, we flew a number of 757-200s across the Atlantic, shorter stages, but it was great. And now, I think the A321XLR with the range capability, and I know, just speaking to a number of our member airlines and understanding. what their strategies are and plans are. That airplane is very unique in capability, but it is kind of the, you know, good things repeat themselves. And you're absolutely right. The vision, obviously, it's better, it's more fuel efficient, the engine technology is great, the cabin is quieter, but it really is the same concept of let's have the long, thin tube with range and see how far we can fly for a thinner international route.
I think Iberia flies that to Boston from Madrid and
They do.
was their first XLR revenue service, and now year round to Dulles as well, again from Madrid.
So Iberia, who I'm gonna to fantastic airline and one that Marco and his team are terrific and their success, yes, with that airplane is has been really inspiring. I know DC and I think Boston is another market that they've talked about if they're not in it already. But yeah, they're very excited about that airplane. I know American is taking some, and we've got a handful of members. So I'm excited to, again, not in my direct bailiwick of responsibility, but excited to see where they go.
Nat, you were talking about Alaska. You have, of course, led Alaska Airlines through its One World entry and managed major alliances at Delta. What lessons have you brought to your role as the CEO of One World?
It's a terrific question, and I think one of the benefits that I have and that maybe I'm able to associate and really link up with our member airlines is that I've worked for medium-sized airlines, like Alaska, Northwest would fit into that bucket. I've also worked at Delta, which is the biggest airline in the world, depending on how you talk and count. Um, and so I'm able, I think, to put myself in the shoes of each of our member airlines. And so if you're a medium-sized member of One World, you want to make sure that your opinions are heard, but you also understand, okay, I'm not the biggest or the best. And so I can be sympathetic with that because I've been in those shoes. And then equally, if you're on the bigger end of the spectrum, the Americans, the Qatars, British Airways, et cetera, understanding that as well. And so it's a balance. So much of my job, as I've learned, Vishal, is politician, ambassador, making the peace, so to speak, emissary. And I think being able to put myself in each of our member airlines' shoes is helpful and probably makes me a little bit more effective.
As the CEO, how do you articulate One World's unique value proposition today? For both member airlines as well as your passengers, how does that differ from your friends at Star Alliance and SkyTeam?
Every alliance, has a little bit different strategy, but I kind of go back to why do they exist in the first place? Why did you know, One World form in 1999 with our five founding members, and that's a quiz actually for you. The four founding members that everybody knows, it's Qantas, it's British Airways, it's American, and Cathay. The question is, do you know who the fifth was?
Finnair?
No, the fifth was actually Canadian Airlines.
All right.
That's a
I'm
his
gonna
that's
I'm
a
going
his
to edit this out.
No, that's fine. That's a history lesson that the only reason I know it is we did a lot of homework on the 25th. Anyway, edit out whatever you like. But
No,
point
no,
being,
no.
those five airlines all came together because they needed to fly their guests in a consistent manner, places that they couldn't fly on their own. It was all network based, right? And so they formed, and over time, five airlines has become 15. Star now have 26. I don't know how many they have, and SkyTeam somewhere in between there. One World we cover 90, satisfy 94% of global demand. Star, SkyTeam, similar sorts of things. And so it's shifted away from adding more members to get that additional last, 3 or 4 or 5% of network demand. The name of the game now is actually leveraging that joint network and presenting to the guest the concept that even though it may be provided by 15 different airlines, it needs for the guest to be as if it's one airline. And so I need to be cutting edge from a technology perspective. I need to make it appear that it is all operating under the same system. And so whether a guest flight is just solely on one world member airline or it's on three or four, it needs to be the same. And seamless is a word that I think all of us cringe at in the airline industry. But it really needs to be that kind of a concept, and we need to deliver it, even though it is a network that's stitched together with 15 disparate airlines. From a guest perspective, we need to be able to present it as one. And it's every facet of the journey, from the time that guest seeks to book their ticket and search to the time they check in, check bags, connect. Can I get into a lounge? Is my bag actually going to show up once I've made my connection? Lost luggage, tracking, etc. And then did I get credit on my frequent flyer miles and points after the fact? That's kind of where we're going right now. I think the other alliances are on a similar journey. I think that our focus is really prioritizing cooperation with each other. And part of that is the systems integration and really tying those networks together.
I understand seamlessness from the guests or the passengers' perspective, but from an airline member's point of view, how does the alliance balance the benefits of network growth with the risk of overlapping routes and internal competition amongst members? You also have a couple of recent additions. Is this all tricky?
It is tricky. That gets back to me playing ambassador and legislator and referee and wearing a variety of different hats. But I think one of the things that makes One World unique is that we balance prioritization with permissiveness. And here's really what that means is at One World, I want our 15 member airlines to prioritize cooperation with each other. I want them to work as closely together, whether it's on bilateral initiatives, it's multilateral initiatives, joint businesses, et cetera, or it's a common offering across all 15 member airlines, whether that's One World Emerald, Sapphire, Ruby, whether it's joint lounges, loyalty upgrades, various initiatives that we're all working on. That needs to be priority number one. But then from a One World perspective, the permissiveness part. So there are going to be areas in the globe that One World member airlines cannot get the cooperation, the network reach in strategic areas from another One World partner. And in that scenario, we allow our One World members to work with non-One World airlines, whether they could be members of Star or SkyTeam, they could be completely unaffiliated. And as you can imagine, that creates some conflict. And again, emissary, referee, et cetera, but trying to balance and prioritize, let's focus first and foremost on doing as much as we can together, and then let's augment that with tactical partnerships with non-One World airlines, because obviously the definition of success for One World is, are our 15 member airlines successful? Yes, they need to get value out of the alliance, but if we have 15 financially profitable, super successful airlines, One World's clearly going to benefit from that. And I like to think that we play an integral part in that too.
What specific criteria or simulations does One World use to evaluate potential new members? How do you ensure that those additions strengthen rather than dilute the alliance's value proposition?
I think we're as I said earlier, we've 15 members. We cover 94, 95% of global demand. And so if you think about it as a statistical curve, we're way down to the tail of adding additional members to bring that last bit of network breadth. And so it means that if we decide to bring in new members beyond the 15 that we have, likely there is going to be some overlap. And so one would start with a traditional QSI model, in essence, a network share, traffic sharing model that kind of would show, okay, let's bring into our existing universe a new airline and let's run the supercomputer, and that will tell us, okay, One World is going to be better or worse by doing that. Each airline is going to be better or worse by doing that. And it's all based on public information and traffic, and then it simulates the future. So that's kind of the first gate to say, okay, is that additive for One World? Is it negative for One World? You can guess that if it's negative for One World, we scratch them off the list, and that wouldn't be the case. So it's networking from a feed perspective. I'd say the second thing that comes into play, no surprise given my background, it's financial. What would that look like? Does this prospective member have bilateral or multilateral partnerships with other Oneworld airlines? And if they do, can you envision that it's productive and that it makes those bilateral or multilateral relationships that much better, makes them deeper, delivers more guest benefits, and as a result, better financial benefits as well. I'd say the third thing would be reputation of the airline. I think in our world, each of the three member alliances would tell you that they're the best. I think the One World focus is on really the premium product, and I would take our 15 carriers from a premium perspective against anyone. And so reputation kind of fits into that. What kind of an airline is it? And then I think lastly, like we all do personally, if you decide, am I going to join a group? Am I going to be friends with this person, etc.? There's the character test. Do you fit with that team? Do you fit with that person? Does the culture of the other member alliances and other member airlines fit with who I am? And I think each of those pieces go in, and that's obviously a two-way discussion. But I think that's really important as well, the character component.
Well, I can think of an unaligned Indian airline that is code sharing with your members. What's the importance of the Indian market for you? And how come you don't have an Indian airline as a member yet?
First and foremost, we have 11 of our 15 members that fly to India, and they serve 11 different Indian cities. So it's obviously a super important market. And then one looks at growth. I also obviously had the benefit of being in Delhi for the IATA meeting, and we had One World CEO meetings as well. All the alliances do. And every time I come to India, and I have a friend there that I've worked together and kind of brought him on our team as well, a guy named Sandeep Ball, who is kind of our One World boots on the ground now. And so enthusiastic about the market, about growth, and what's constantly working in our mind and with our team is, okay, we don't have a member airline in India today. Maybe we will someday, but how can we take advantage of the 11 members and the presence that we have throughout the country and really try to cast a broader shadow than individually? And so if you think about the One World offerings that are in place in other regions, lounges, for example, we have two joint lounges. We just opened them last year, first in Amsterdam, the second one in Seoul. India is a super logical place for that. We have the big cities. Obviously, you think of Delhi and Mumbai, Bangalore and Hyderabad, but I'll even give you a market like Chennai, where we have 6 One World members that fly to Chennai. Well, that might make a lot of sense. And so I'm not going to go any deeper on that, but I will say, just even from a lounge perspective, something that we're working on. And then when I'm back talking to my 15 bosses, the CEOs of the 15 member airlines, they really like this concept. Yes, sure, the easiest way to have presence in a market is a member airline, and we're working on that too. But meanwhile, that's going to take time. How can we actually work together, find an initiative of scale in a market that we all care about? And so we're working on a lot of different fronts.
A few days back, you mentioned how up to 10 more One World lounges are in the pipeline over the next 3 to 5 years, with the India emerging as a key target. And I also know for a fact that opening a lounge in an Indian airport is not easy. The airport operators in all the major airports, they prefer to run their own show. There's a lack of space also, presumably, but there might be an opportunity in the two new airports coming up, hopefully in Noida, New Delhi, and Navi Mumbai. Nat, what kind of alliance benefits can be tailored for Indian passengers? From a loyalty perspective, network, premium services, besides the lounge itself?
I think it gets back to, Vishal, one of the reasons that airlines join an alliance is what I like to call you want to participate in initiatives of scale, things that you can be more effective working with your friends in a market or on an initiative than you can be on your own. And so a lot of different things fall into that camp that you just mentioned, loyalty, sustainability is another one, very lounges, logical things. And so I look at it as what can we do that's tailored within the Indian market? Maybe it is a joint loyalty promotion, for example. Maybe it's taking advantage of, the 11 member airlines that fly there today, six of whom have code share with Indigo, which then serve well beyond just the 11 Indian cities that Oneworld Airlines fly directly to. And really, again, put our joint power to work. And a number of different initiatives. Another reason, getting boots on the ground in India, thinking about all of these possibilities and the ways that we can work in the market.
If I can have you, step into the shoes of being an airline leader again, from an alliance leader, let's just talk about Indigo for a second.
Hmm.
They have code share with two of your members, with JAL
Hmm.
and with BA. Of course,
Actually six.
six.
Yes.
Oh,
American, BA, Qantas, Qatar, JAL,
oh
and
yes,
Malaysia.
of course,
I
of
did
course.
my homework.
And I should have done better.
Oh, you're good.
At IATA, you would have seen they did quite a show with the Sky team members, and they
Hmm.
also have a code share with a couple of Star Alliance members.
Hmm.
As an airline CXO, how do you
Hmm.
decide which alliance to go for?
So I'll give you my perspective playing that role at Alaska. So we had a terrific team at Alaska and evaluating, and Alaska historically had been what we like to call it, had a Switzerland approach to alliances, kind of wanted to be partners with everyone. And so it was from all three major alliances, also with airlines that weren't a member of any alliance. And yet at Alaska, we reached the point where we decided from an international presence perspective, we needed to become a member of one. And the reason is because our most elite, highest spending travelers, so much of their business was going on international airlines and they like earning Alaska miles and with our partner airlines and being able to redeem. But Vishal, what we couldn't deliver with that disparate connection of various airlines was a consistent elite experience. We didn't have anything like a One World Emerald, for example. And so British Airways was one of Alaska's biggest partners, Seattle, London. And we would take Alaska's most elite flyer. They could redeem their points on British Airways's flight, but they weren't treated as if they were flying first class unless they redeemed on that. So even though it was an Alaska highest tier elite, it didn't translate to anything. And so we went to British Airways and asked, can we actually just the two of us put together some bilateral reciprocal elite benefits? And BA said kindly, well, we value the partnership, but if that's really what you want, you need to join the alliance. And so we kind of had that internal discussion and eventually evaluated the three alliances and decided that One World was the best fit for us. And kind of as I mentioned earlier, network fit, I think cultural fit is really important. And reputation as well. Again, at Alaska, we had partners in all three of them. And so, we're able to kind of pick and choose and are excited about that. I think from an Indigo perspective, it's a similar sort of evolution. They are able, because of their dominant position in India right now, able to partner effectively with pretty much anybody they want to. And I think they're doing that. And so, yes, the announcement in Delhi with Delta, Virgin Atlantic, Air France, and KLM, but partners, as I said, with six of our members, they've star members as well. So I think it's a logical play. I think the moment of truth for Indigo, and who knows when that comes, it may be several years off, is do you eventually get to the point of beyond flying your own metal into these markets and delivering elite benefits as they evolve? do you need partners to be able to deliver those reciprocal elite benefits? And if you do, that would be a motivator to then choose an alliance. The one other thing I would say, Vishal, which you will take probably find humor in, as will the listeners, is so the Indigo CEO is Peter Elbers, and I mentioned my cutting my teeth, so to speak, in alliances at Northwest. Well, Peter was at KLM at the same time. And so he and I actually used to plan the Northwest KLM transatlantic joint network back in the '05, '06, '07 days and have remained really good friends all the way through. So it's just with special enthusiasm that I watch all the success that Indigo is having, and obviously rooting for Peter and really just thrilled for him that they've been so successful.
Yes, absolutely. For a market like ours, where airlines have never achieved this kind of success that Indigo has now, it's a moment of pride to
Of
see
course.
Indigo amongst the top carriers in the world. It's
You
awesome.
should, and it's funny. I mentioned earlier just listening to Morrow and the podcast you did with him, which was fantastic, and he mentioned his experience in the past of dealing with both Kingfisher and Jet Airways. And I, of course, have those experiences as well with those two. And again, the idea is similar to kind of where Indigo is now. Find, an international airline with elite product that, can cater and have a big presence in this booming and growing Indian market. And obviously, Kingfisher and Jet are no longer with us, but the appetite for partner airlines all over the world for an A plus Indian partner has always been high. That was 20 years ago, and it's still there.
Absolutely, Nat. Going forward, as low cost and ultra low cost carriers continue their own distribution partnerships, do you see Oneworld eventually segmenting its own value proposition, perhaps a premium only core plus a connective layer, or will you integrate LCCs to capture high volume VFR traffic without eroding premium yields?
It's an interesting question. I think the easiest kind of airline to integrate and have a consistent product delivery would be kind of full service airlines like the members we have today. But that said, Indigo's a great example, right? I mean, they're evolving from a product perspective, but we have code shares with six of our members, and all over the world other, of our members have code share relationships with airlines that we would not put into the full service bucket. So I think it's an evolving landscape. I think what makes One World unique is our focus on premium traffic, and I think that's the core that guests would say that One World delivers, access into first class lounges for our Emerald customers. So we're clearly steering into that premium space, but I think that's just a balance that you need to have with network, with other tactical sorts of things. And so it's the kind of question of, like with the Indigo six code share relationships, and I mentioned earlier, permissiveness. Would it make sense for an LCC to ultimately be a member? I don't know. Could it make sense for an LCC oriented airline to have, code share or interline relationships with every one of our members? Yeah, maybe it would.
Alliance memberships come with substantial fees and shared revenue commitments and whatnot. Are there any specific KPIs and ROI metrics that are usually looked at to justify ongoing investment in airline alliances from a financial point of view and from an overall resources point of view?
I think from again, having played my trade at airlines, right? All of which were members of one. I think first and foremost, as I said when we started, why do airlines join alliances at the beginning? It's from a network span perspective. It's an ease of convenience, getting your most important customers anywhere in the world they want to go with consistent benefits across it and elite levels, transfers, et cetera. I think that speaks for itself. And I think each of our members has a pretty good understanding of span of the globe. I'll give you a great example on it. Oman Air, who joined at the end of June, and I wasn't privy to Oman Air's financial analysis of is it worthwhile for us to join an alliance. I'm sure the numbers were positive, but I think from a bringing Oman Air the capability of now connecting conveniently their guests all over the world. I think it just was a very straightforward decision from them for what the country is seeking to do, et cetera. And so I think each of our members takes that back. They clearly run their own numbers. From a Oneworld perspective, as I said, I have 15 bosses, each of those CEOs at member airlines, and I want to justify to them every day that it's worth their while to be in the alliance. I think a lot of it, as I said, is obvious with global span, but we also want to keep delivering initiatives that make it super obvious that we should continue to invest. Because I've been on the other side of it where, as a finance person controlling the resources, should I work and invest our capital in a project that's specific just to our airline, or do I do it in a multi-airline alliance initiative that really is only going to be successful if everybody else participates too? There's some leap of faith to it. And so, what our One World team focuses on every day is really delivering value and communicating that value to each of our member airlines, whether it's the common digital platform, loyalty upgrades, lounges, the like.
Is there a role that OneWorld plays to coordinate with members to optimize route networks and avoid duplication or inefficiency, or is all of that up to member airlines themselves?
It's really up to airline members themselves. It depends on what layer of coordination they have. I mean, antitrust immunity and joint businesses obviously enables airlines to jointly plan their networks together and price together. You then devolve into code share and just interline where you don't have the ability to coordinate on that, but you may work together in other sorts of things. I'd say the One World primary role in those sorts of things is playing referee. So maybe a dispute has come to pass. Maybe um, we need to kind of help facilitate settlements, or this is driving this one nuts, and you guys really need to talk about that. One of the benefits of our job is we do get to see across all 15 airlines and can kind of troubleshoot and say, oh gosh, we're hearing a lot of that from member number six. Next time you talk to so and so, you might want to whisper to them that they reach out and obviously all completely in an above board way, but really trying to just coordinate with harmony.
In the next 5 odd years, do you see alliances the way they are right now, or do you see a modular ecosystem emerging? You mentioned how airlines look at their own networks and their ambitions before joining an alliance, and vice versa. Do you see a time where there are alliance partners for certain regions, and how Star Alliance integrates Deutsche Bahn so they have multimodal connectivity out of a couple of airports as well? I want to know your thoughts on all of this and where alliances are going, the way you look at it.
I think the way I think about it is again kind of back to why did they start from the beginning? And it's really getting people and getting your most important guests where they want to go. And we, of course, being in the airline industry, have always kind of thought of that as, well, flying on airplanes, but lots of different ways. Rail, of course, is a potential option. A lot of different iterations I can think of in my 28-year career that we've looked at. And so while we're primarily in the airline business, I do think that there is a possibility to expand that way. Obviously, Star has envisioned that there is value in doing that. I do think from a technology perspective, as things start to evolve away from 100% reliance on old mainframe-based systems and technology gets more nimble, a lot of the historical barriers are going to come down. And so one might conclude then from that additional flexibility that maybe the core proposition of the alliance isn't as effective as it used to be, I kind of go in the other direction of that. I think even though the opportunity set may get broader, it becomes all the more important that you prioritize those members that you have worked and have the most depth of partnership with. In essence, you re-justify why you're working together with those partners. You've got a tremendous head start and just continue to reinvent what you're doing together with new initiatives. And that's something that we're focused on at Oneworld every day.
You mentioned technology. There's been talk around digital distribution and IATA's NDC. Some airlines have been successful in trying it out, some not so much, for various reasons. From an alliance point of view, what is OneWorld's roadmap for leveraging NDC and other technologies like dynamic packaging? Do you have a point of view on that?
I have not in terms of which technology will ultimately be the winner. As we experienced together before we started recording, I was not capable of getting my headphones hooked into my computer. So I don't think I'm probably the likely resource on that. But I would say this is actually a great example of making one of the roles that Oneworld plays is getting the 15 member airlines, getting their experts together to share ideas on where they're going. It's kind of another one of those initiatives of scale where, yes, each of the 15 maybe are at a different level of trial or have had different experiences. And one of the things that Oneworld actually can do, we have a lot of areas where we have very sharp functional experts, sustainability, communications and marketing, et cetera. This kind of NDC cutting edge technology, I don't have a Oneworld leader that is super adept at that, but those are still links that we can make within the 15 member community so that we make sure that they facilitate. I kind of call Oneworld's role in that as kind of a punch and cookies role, where we will set up the meeting, we will get the experts together, we'll bring the cookies, and then make it just goes from there. And I think again, why are airlines interested in joining alliances? It's because sharing ideas with your friends, you can be more effective than you would be on your own.
All right. Is it fair to ask you your favorite airline, Nat?
You can ask me anything. You know, honestly, here's the candid answer. Each of the 15 have something unique that's really fantastic. And I tell you, the thing that I've really enjoyed in my, I guess it's been 16, 17 months now, is actually getting out and visiting each of the airlines and spending time in their headquarters, getting to walk the airports, seeing all the different cultures. It's what brought me to the airline and the alliances side of it from the beginning, the international component, all of the different cultures and the ways they think about it, and the pride that everybody takes in showing Oneworld, showing others about our newest airplane or our airport experience. And it's been really rich. So the canned answer that I'm going to give you, which is my favorite airline, it's the Oneworld member that I'm flying that day. And it's been amazing.
Bingo. And now for the last question. I'm sure I'm not getting a canned response there. Tell me, Nat, what's been your most memorable flight or an aviation moment, either as a passenger or an executive? I remember you spoke about the 757 and the 747
Yep.
at the beginning of our chat. But anything else that stands out if you think about it?
Vishal, that's a super fun question. And I'm going to start it this way, which will prove I may not be as AvGeek as you, but we could debate that. So
Oh no. No, 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 no. After that Indigo One World tidbit, there's a definite question mark about me there. For sure.
moving into the alliances job at Northwest in 2006, I didn't remember things very well then. I sure don't remember things as well now as I did then. But I had the idea that, you know what, I'm going to be flying all over the world to places that I've never been before. I should keep a record of every flight that I've taken and maybe the restaurant that I ate at or something that I did on those experiences. And so I actually have a spreadsheet that logs every flight I've taken since 2006. And so I looked it up and I thought about it. And the second thing that people that know me well is I'm a big family person. And so my wife and my daughter and we have a 6.5 pound cat. So it's basically the four of us. But with my wife and my daughter have traveled the world, being an airline lifer, and it's been fantastic. And so one of my favorite things about the Northwest job was I would go to Asia, I would go to Europe. My daughter was 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. And so we would pull her out of school and she would come with us. And while I would go work, my wife and my daughter would tromp all over the place. And so one of my favorite memories is flying in a 747-400 upstairs out of Minneapolis to Tokyo. And before we took off, we had three seats in business class upstairs, and the captain comes out. And in those days they wore the traditional hats, and so I have a wonderful picture of my daughter flying to Tokyo with the captain's hat that's twice as big as her head and all the way down, and just a wonderful experience. And that picture pops up every once in a while in my iPhone feed, and every time it brings you right here. So that would be the one that I remember. But again, kind of the more experience of, and I think I've been blessed with that, of being able to see the world, share it with family and friends, and 28-year industry lifer, but I wouldn't trade a thing.
What a beautiful memory indeed. And with that, you have hit it out of the park. In cricketing terms, that's a six. And for you, it will be a home run, Nat.
You're kind.
There is absolutely no question about you being the geekier one, especially with the flight journal since 2006.
Yes.
Nat, I'm so happy that you agreed to come on my half century episode, and thank you for being so forthcoming, for being so generous, for being so awesome during our chat. I loved it.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting us. And again, congratulations. Accomplishing 50 of anything is tremendous. And I wish you all the best going forward.
50 episodes in, and the runway still looks long and exciting. Very pleased with the way Indian AvGeek has turned out so far, and hopefully in the coming episodes as well. Next Sunday, the Indian AvGeek returns, and we will have the Chief Client Officer for Dentsu South Asia, Anita Kotwani, on the show. As usual, don't forget to subscribe and share this episode of the Indian AvGeek with your fellow AvGeeks. Nat has not been active on X for a few years now, but you can follow Oneworld there. As always, I'm at Vishal Mehra. Happy to have your feedback. With that, keep your tray tables up, your seatbelts fastened. I wish you well, and happy flying, my friends!